Okay, we'll move on. Next is discussion with Town Board and Plan Commission, possible action by Plan Commission, conditional use site plan, architecture, landscaping, and plan of operation. This is an item that's tabled from the February 14th, 2013 meeting. The owner is Dunkin' Donuts. The applicant is Mr. Mark Schneider. Location is South 30 West 24836 Sunset Drive. Tax key WAKT 1335942005. We need a motion to untable this item.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, so, Mr. Dupler?
Certainly. At the conclusion of our last meeting, it was left to the petitioner to come and meet with staff with some revisions to the geometry of the site and the recommendations for modification to landscaping. We met, both the engineer and I, with the petitioner and the petitioner's engineer in regards to the number of different options that were thrown out at the Plan Commission meeting. At this time, let me just go up and open a site plan so that you can all perhaps appreciate what changes have been made.
As you're doing that, Roger, there are open seats in the front. If people would like to come forward, it might be a long meeting, there are definitely open seats in the front if anybody would like to sit down. Feel free.
I believe this site plan, which is actually the paving plan, might be the best one to look at because it has the gray tone on the pavement. You can see the building and the islands rather easily. In meeting with the engineer and myself, it was concluded that as requested by the Plan Commission and the Town Board last month, first thing we evaluated was whether or not it was truly achievable to conduct all of the traffic in a counterclockwise motion around the building. Perhaps limiting the exit of the drive-through lane to turn only left and head east. What we determined is that was really not feasible, even though ideally it would work. But in the existing condition, we have easements that are already in place that warrant two-way traffic. And based on engineer's recommendation that it's just introducing one-way traffic in the middle of a two-way traffic parking lot, it's somewhat incongruent and is not truly safe. We also took a look at, first of all, the access on the east side to Prairie Road, whether or not this is something that should be supported, should be removed, should be relocated. The petitioner's proposal in this position is, as far as we can ascertain, an appropriately designed intersection with appropriate access. There have been many comments this evening in regards to safety and traffic congestion from the west access for this complex. From a planning perspective, I can only assure you that the more interconnectivity that we have with more driveways, the better chance that those congestion areas will be alleviated. From an engineering standpoint, that location has the appropriate stacking from Sunset. It's far enough away so that it doesn't conflict with the acceleration taper from the northern drive. And as for its separation from the railroad to the far north, it's actually a better location than the existing driveway, which is further north and closer to the railroad tracks as well. The drive-through lane has been modified. Actually, the entrance coming in off of Prairie, you can see, introduces a parking or a median island so as to force divergence of the traffic. You're entering traffic from the east heading into the parking lot from Prairie is forced north and thereby lining up directly in line with the westbound travel lane through the parking lot. Eastbound traffic in that parking lot then is forced, because of the island, to swing south to exit the site. The purpose of that island is to remove any of the undefined traffic movements, if you will, get rid of some of the ambiguity of traffic movements. And in addition to that, there's an island added on the north side of the building to actually move the entrance of the drive-through further west. All of these in combination, we feel comfortable that it works well that the geometry provides enough turning radii in a safe fashion that it'll function well. Chris, you want to add anything in that regard?
No, actually, I was gonna say, I was wondering if you read my letter, because everything you just said is basically what I wrote.
I try to use Chris's letters for my presentation as much as possible.
You present so much better than me, so it's a good team.
Also, the petitioner took into account the Planning Commission's recommendation to increase their landscape screening on the west side, where it was originally a painted island for the purpose of delivery trucks. Now there is a landscape island there with appropriate greenery, so as to increase the greenery on site immediately south of the drive-through lane in order to shield headlights of exiting traffic from the neighbors across Sunset. There's evergreen materials been incorporated in that regard. And on the east side, the southeast corner of the parking where the dumpster location is, additional evergreen material has been added there as well. It may be a bit confusing in portions of my report to you in that when the report was written, the landscape plan was really not available. After the report was written, the landscape plan became available, so I modified portions of it. I forgot to modify the portion of the recommendation that says they need to submit a revised landscape plan. But in my analysis and in light of the cooperativeness of the petitioner, I would recommend your consideration for approval with really no contingencies here. I want to remind everyone that this site was approved for a drive-through lane in 2004. Our purpose with this conditional use, we are evaluating the site plan because it's an attachment to that conditional use, so we're actually approving the site plan geometry. The issue of the drive-through by town records is already approved. Mr. Racky brought out to everyone's attention that the county has disapproved the drive-through. I don't have that information available to me. We don't have anything in the town files in that regard. I would ask for your consideration, allow me to do a little bit more investigation in that regard and figure out what the real history here is. But aside from that, I don't see that there's too many things that can be modified further. I would encourage your consideration for approval, and I'm sure Mr. Gianelli has some other stuff to add.
I do. Thank you, Roger. My letter dated March 7th is rather long-winded, but basically the first several paragraphs reiterates the discussions that we had at the meeting, specifically detailing the drive-through traffic, the driveway entrance onto Prairie Avenue, and also traffic patterns within the site, all of which I won't bore you again with because Roger so eloquently detailed them for you tonight. However, my last paragraph, basically from our previous letter, there were a couple items that had been left unfinished. One was the sidewalk connection from the sidewalk on Sunset Drive, and then also a modification of the notes and specifications detailing with concrete pavement and Prairie Avenue. So other than that, I think what we see in front of us here kind of satisfies all the concerns that we had previously. So I think that's about it.
For the benefit of everybody, can someone just at the front walk us through the anticipated traffic patterns to how will people actually enter and exit, depending upon if they're using the drive-through or if they're using just coming up and parking?
You're louder than I am now.
Take the microphone.
Sure.
You'll just have to project, Chris.
I think most people will probably enter from this driveway here. Drive-through traffic will obviously come around the drive-through. It's possible that they'll be able to turn to the west and exit out the driveway where there's already, people have mentioned, congestion is felt. But with two other exits from this site, most people take the path of least resistance, so it's possible that they can swing around and come back this way or come around that way. So I don't know if
So when they come out of the driveway, the drive-through, which is on the southwest corner, they have an option of going east or west at that point. So if they go west, they would probably be exiting on the Sunset Drive. If they go east, there is a drive-through, or drive area there, and then they could exit on Prairie.
go that way, right? Or conversely, all the way around that way, or up to the existing exit to the north.
So when people come in off of Prairie, they're taking that northmost drive lane, and then they would be potentially taking, going immediately to a left to come into the parking area as well?
Yeah.
So they would be.
This configuration allows people that are coming into the site to make a determination, do I want to go to St. Vinny's to the north, do I want to go to Dunkin' Donuts to get a coffee to the south, maybe I want to go to the drive-through and come in this way. It's feasible too that people could use this entrance for access to the other developments to the west, as well as using it as an exit from those developments as well.
And there's nothing keeping somebody who's coming in from that Prairie entrance from going all the way around to the outside, to the west side of the drive-through area and coming around to the front as well? So if they're coming in that entrance, yes, they can come all the way through, okay.
One of the concerns we had previously was traffic exiting the site here was kind of in conflict with incoming traffic here, and this configuration solves that problem.
So you're thinking there's more of a separation because now they're gonna be further north as they're coming in?
Right.
And the boulevard's kind of separating that.
Right, exactly. This will allow people to make a determination before getting through an intersection before entering the drive-through lane.
Okay, thank you. Question? Yes, Mr. Jones?
Mr. Janelli, could you stay there? I unfortunately was not here when the initial presentation was made, and I apologize if I'm repeating something that's already been covered. Do you know, either of you gentlemen know, whether as a result of these now proposed improvements, there is going to be a net reduction of parking for the entire complex?
A net reduction for the entire complex, yes, there is.
You know what the
small-
magnitude of that might be?
Very small, because it's only the footprint of that building. And the parcel dedicated to Dunkin' Donuts here has about 30% more parking spaces for their own service than what they are actually required, so.
For
they're-
Dunkin' Donuts
for the-
or
for
for
the-
the entire floor space?
For the entire floor space of that proposed building. They've got plenty of parking. They've got
And,
plenty of parking, and they have a surplus that can be used for St. Vinny's or the Donuts further west.
and hypothetically, as I know of one situation where Culver's Restaurant just opened up on Blue Mound and Moreland, and they also allowed within that building Fireman's Sub restaurant to go in. If the operators were attempting to maximize the synergy and have a sub and an ice cream store there, what would your assessment be as to the adequacy of the parking?
That's a very good question, and I think the petitioners need to be aware of that. Currently, this is being evaluated with the Dunkin' Donuts and commercial space. If another tenant were to come in that is a restaurant-type tenant, their parking requirements are different. So it's going to start with that aggregate space that's dedicated for service in a restaurant as the calculations are done. And we have to compare that to the site proper. Right now, they have an overage, but that could very quickly be eaten up if there's another restaurant in there.
Is this a situation, again, because I don't know what the original subdivision, or rather CFSUM arrangements were made, but is this a situation where, say, two other restaurant operators were to come in and say, well, parking is no issue because we can have access to the surrounding parking, is that permitted or not?
There are currently shared parking arrangements between all of these parcels. However, for the protection of the town, we have to look as if this is an independent parcel, and it has to satisfy its own parking on site. You don't know what could happen a decade from now. That parcel could be sold off separately. Those easements, those shared parking easements could go away. So I would encourage the town, with the knowledge that there will be modifications in the future, to understand that that parking will determine who those potential tenants will be, in order to be self-sufficient in this little corner of the parking lot.
Okay. I noticed, and probably because it was very difficult to find a place for it, that the refuse container is probably in the most visible part of that entire track, which would be at near the intersection of Sunset and Prairie. If we do have other restaurants and they have adequate parking, what are we going to do about the refuse? Is that going to be sufficient, or are we going to have stacking of debris or cartons on the outside?
That's, again, another very good question. I'll ask Mark to address that. You got what size, that's designed for what size?
The current enclosure is 10 by 20, so it's set up for two 6-yard containers, one for recycling, one for refuse. And as they fill up, that would determine how often we would have to have them picked up during the week. If it's once a week, twice a week. So that's how we address that. But everything would be in the enclosure all the time. That's something we have to police as the landlord and developer.
So it's for all the tenants?
Yes, it
that
is.
refuse centers,
Yes, it
all
is.
tenants.
Right.
Is that something that should be addressed in the conditional use permit?
It certainly can. It certainly
Leaving it
can.
at the discretion of the town to review and compel accelerated pickup of refuse?
It certainly can be put into the conditional use. I would also remind you that you have the luxury of reviewing the business plans of operation for any tenants coming in, and as part of the site plan, even though it's a multi-tenant building, this is the parent site plan that everyone's gonna have to abide by. There's no identification of outdoor storage, so you're not gonna have future tenants thinking they could store stuff behind the back door either.
In this particular situation, you've indicated that you've received a landscaping plan. Are you satisfied that the height of the vegetation that is shown surrounding the trash refuse container is sufficient to adequately screen the dumpster storage area?
The type of landscape material going in here is proposed to be 4-foot height. It's juniper, it's rather quick growing. In other municipalities, there are sometimes requirements for 6-foot height minimum for screening. I think just switching out a different type of species, if the petitioner wants to consider that, is something that could be done, but I don't have a problem with what's there.
Thank you.
There's some pretty significant vegetation already. I mean, if I remember correctly, it's hard to see even the St. Vincent store at this point in time.
There is quite a bit of significant vegetation. Quite a bit of that vegetation is dead. It will be coming down, so it will open up some view corridors into this parking lot. With the location of their shrub beds and such, I think they've taken that all into account.
Andrew, has there been any discussion, we've heard a lot about the concern of the safety, the pressure of the overflow parking and people going over to that western property. That front, right on the, would end up being the northwest corner there, where the cars come in and then they all take a hard right, some 30 feet in, that particular driveway. Has there been any discussion into closing that driveway area off and moving it further north?
No,
I
we're
meant
not
to say
exactly.
south. Sorry. Well, it's the southwest corner, moving that driveway a little bit further north would maybe offer some relief or some increased safety.
There's, part of the problem is this was designed a number of years ago, and there's cross easements for the Berkshire that's there, as well as the former grocery store, as well as the strip center, which are all under different ownership at this point. So there's a lot of parties that are involved in determining those things. Are you just thinking rather than taking a hard right, going further
Well, yeah, you'd have
north?
more of a, you know, if people are walking across from the parking to the strip mall, instead of a car trying to make a hard right and clipping somebody or making a left to get out of that area, they'd have more of a straightaway, more of a line of sight, and it might offer a little bit of a deterrent to visitors of the Dunkin' Donuts in that mall from heading west to get out on the Sunset. They might loop around, so you might actually be able to steer some of that traffic
You'd have
away
to-
from that roadway.
But you'd have to change significantly
I
the
think you-
current parking, correct?
I think you could close off, again, I don't know anything about this stuff, you guys do, but, you know, closing off that driveway, just jogging it, you know, 15 parking spaces further north.
Are you talking about this access here, Joe?
Yes. So if you moved it to the, let's say, the rear of the existing strip mall on the left side. So, yeah, there. If you made that a entry point and closed that other one, and you would relieve some of that pressure that's existing, or that would exist, right there at that corner. Just thought.
But it would impede there's, if I remember correctly, there are cross easements for parking in that section for the people that are going to Cardinal, so it would make it a further walk for them to try to,
I don't think it would, you'd just be,
You'd just be encouraging all traffic to travel this far into the site northward
Travel
before
here
they try to
and
park.
turn in and park, and instead of this being a driveway, this would actually become possibly additional parking spaces for that easement. And you wouldn't have all of the public traffic being right here where all the pedestrians are crossing. They'd be coming a little bit deeper, which would give them that improved line of sight, so you wouldn't have somebody turning, looking for oncoming traffic and not seeing the person walk across the shop.
engineers, what do you think of that, planners and engineers?
I think you're still gonna have that conflict of the pedestrians, but you wouldn't have the issues where, you know, I don't know if incoming traffic stalls there where there's not enough queuing between Sunset and that interior intersection, if that's an issue. From my understanding, the issue is more exiting. People can't turn left out of there.
right, and I think that would give a little bit of a deterrent, you know, from somebody coming through the drive-through. They're not gonna see their closest escape back on the Sunset is
Sure.
right there. Get them to come back out onto Prairie. If you close that entry and jog it down just a little bit, the users of the strip mall that exists would, you know, adapt to that. The new users going to the new location may not even consider that if they drive back around that way, it would be, I think, more natural for them to loop around the building than head out to Prairie.
Yeah, the opposite is also true where the people that are having problems there now with the fitness, if that driveway remains and we put this new driveway onto Sunset, could potentially go out that way. So,
Where they'd be limited.
whereas they'd have to go around and they'd be less likely to figure that out.
Roger, you have a thought on this as planner?
My only thought is that if we have an entrance coming off of Prairie here, that's lining up with the aisle here, it seems that causing a vertice here of both this aisle and your entrance drive here would take a lot of this traffic and escort them right out to Prairie for eastbound traffic.
Is that are you saying that's a good thing?
I would consider that a good thing, sure. Eliminating this drive access here increases the throat of your entrance here, eliminates some of the traffic movements right at the intersection. It's worth considering. It's something that St. Vincent de Paul is gonna have to support.
Well, I think it's not only St. Vincent de Paul, I think it's also Berkshire, I think it's also the strip mall. I mean, there's a lot of parties involved in that kind of change. If that were to, there's no guarantee that even if we were to request that would be.
Right, you've got cross-access easements here that are a number of people are a party to them. Mark, do you want to speak?
I was going to mention that not only are the easements an issue, it's in an area of the site that we don't,
Yeah, why don't you use the mic?
I'm sorry. Mark Schneider. Aside from the easement issue, that there aren't any easements that currently come across the site, it's also on a portion of the site that we do not control, so there are other entities involved, so I'm not sure that we would be able to make that happen.
Other than you haven't purchased this site yet?
Correct.
Okay, so the people are still motivated to get things done?
It is possible, yes.
Okay.
It's not actually the owner of that isn't related at all to the sale, unfortunately.
Okay.
They're separate owners. There's actually, the parcel, it's 3 separate owners between the shopping center, St. Vincent de Paul, and the proposed piece
But
that,
the original developer is still the owner of the parcel that you're purchasing?
correct, but he has no say with the piece that he sold,
But very familiar with?
and with the entire parcel,
Whatever.
yes, definitely.
Yes.
And if everybody on the site is concerned about safety, I mean, the Le Cafe Bistro business owner has said that he's got 300 people he speaks on behalf of, and if I heard correct, they were residents of the senior facility, they were consumers of the strip mall. I mean, I can't see how there isn't enough leverage to say, hey, we've got a safety issue here, then we found a way that provides some relief to that, and it causes us to close off one opening and create another one 25 feet down. Again, it's money and.
The only thing I would say though, Joe, I mean, the only people we've heard from have been Cafe Bistro, even though they have 300 people come in, and I did take a look at the list, a lot of people they were a very diverse group. You obviously draw people from lots of different areas to come in and partake. I think it would be important then to hear from the rest of the people in that strip mall, because they're valid, participants in this as well. They have not expressed any we haven't received any documentation from anyone else. So I think it would be important to hear their voices too. What about a stepped approach to this? Is there any way to, if it created a problem, that there would be some way for us to provision something with the ownership or the sale to have a trigger point if this were to become a problem? Traffic-wise, if it was truly a problem?
I think that's a question for Hector, because I don't know how a trigger mechanism would be. The incentive for the non-owners here to
Well, it would be the sellers of the I mean, those that own it now would have to commit to it.
I don't know what the definitive answer would be, because I have not studied the cross easements. But I think the prospective buyers, occupants, will never have any more leverage than they have now to try to anticipate a problem, because in the end, they're all going to be there together. And if there is a problem, the burden is going to fall on the shoulders of the town to try to mediate and bring the parties together. My recommendation would be that, given that there has been so much progress made here, that you consider tabling this matter to allow Mr. Schneider to get together with the other principals and to take in and try to identify a solution along the lines as have been suggested by Mr. Bansky, having the town professionals available to provide input, because they obviously have studied the situation. You're really looking at a dynamic situation, particularly since you only have one tenant identified there. And it's easier right now with a cleaner slate to address the problem.
If I may, we came last month in front of the board and listened to lots of recommendations about what we could do, should do. We met with our engineers met with the town engineers, and they'd come up with a solution that the town engineers and town planner were amenable to, under the easements and available things that we had in our toolbox to utilize. And no, we cannot identify the tenant, it's not a restaurant, but that's another issue that we would be bringing in front of you anyways, so that you'd be able to see what that tenant is. but the chances of getting this put together with all the parties that are involved, I'm being told that it's probably not likely that we can get all the parties, the ownership parties, to get together in a timely fashion, and the tenant we have and things that we have to put together may end up falling apart in that timeframe.
Well, I've inferred from your comment that you have not made that contact. And
Because
until,
just tonight, I found out about the idea, let's
Right.
talk with the.
And that's the whole purpose of this process. Because once approval is given, there is a transfer of certain rights. So I would strongly suggest that you consider, rather than speculating what's going to happen, make a good faith effort so that after the fact, problems arise and there has been a reluctance on the part of the other property owners to come, at least to meet with you and try to identify potential problems. You can say, we did that, we met on a certain date, these were the proposals. Because the town is not under any timeline to take action on this matter.
Mhm.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
I was not here the evening that you made your initial proposal, so I'm planning to catch up, but I'm interested in the drive-through function. Is this a single or mobile drive-through window or drive-through?
It is a single, you order at a menu board with a speaker, and then you pick up your order and pay for it at the same window.
Okay, then my follow-up question is to you or any of your other associates here, when I can, and maybe you've already given this information, give us an idea of the average duration of time to serve a customer, or how long, or how many people an hour? Is there any statistical information? Give us how quickly people might be expected to move through there, some credible information?
Typical drive-through time, and I'm John Clark, typical drive-through time ranges 120 seconds to 150 seconds,
Thank you.
okay? And then, as speaking with Mark, we are part of the co-developer, we are here to talk about, conditional use of the drive-through, and all respect to the attorney, it seems like we're being put on a conditional use here. We came forward in front of the planning board to talk about the drive-through as such, and that's what we're looking for a conditional permit for. And now with the statement, we're seeing that, we have a conditional use on a conditional use to get the drive-through approved. And that's what we were in front of the board for, was the plot as stated, recommendations, from the supervisor, well taken, but now we're being asked to go back and work with other property owners to make a conditional use to our conditional use that we're applying for.
I understand what you're saying, but at the same time, new information has surfaced which the town will have to take into consideration, particularly the 2004 or 2005 recommendation by the county to not allow this. And you may look at it as different layers, but in reality, it's only one conditional use. And the ultimate question that the town plan commission and the town have to evaluate is whether allowing this will complicate the situation, the traffic pattern, and create difficulty down the road. And particularly in your situation where you have no idea who you're going to have as tenants, there are variables that the town should seriously take into consideration and try to anticipate. So I would suggest that a good faith effort to talk to the other tenants, particularly in light of all of the public concern that has been expressed, would demonstrate your willingness to work it out.
Well, I guess in their defense, I mean, they've done a lot to try to work it
No
out.
question about it.
Okay, so I mean, I don't want you to feel as though we don't appreciate the fact that you have had multiple time over multiple months to try to figure out how this would best suit everyone, and that's pretty well impossible to suit everyone. I guess one of my questions, and I know Mr. Banksky's not gonna claim he's an engineer, but, he's throwing out, maybe a common sense type of solution, right? Does this drive-through as it's proposed, and could you go back to the actual presentation? So where the entrance is on Prairie, how does that fall with 15 feet or where Mr. Bansky was suggesting the back of the building would be? Is that even in line? to even consider that option? Because we have very limited access as to where we can put a driveway on Prairie, if I remember correctly. And so, does anybody know where that, if you go directly west, where that ends up?
Sure, let's use the existing property boundary. Can you see my cursor?
No.
Existing property boundary is just north of the building. Here's your west property line, your north property line comes across here. As part of their easement agreement, access easement agreement, this drive-through is in easement until you turn the corner here. So that lines up with the south side of the Prairie Avenue, or the Prairie Road access drive, that property line. Here's the same property line. So that access aisle will be coming right across the top of those islands. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and that's not as far north as Mr. Mansky was suggesting.
Probably, it's 7 parking stalls, so that's, how wide is a parking stall?
But it would mean taking out
9
all
feet, so
of,
that's 60-some feet.
but it would mean taking out all of those islands that were required as part of the plan when that was approved, correct? I mean, those concrete islands in there were part of separation, were part of the required parking structure when that was.
Correct. These parking islands are being replaced with green space right up against the north side of the building already. These parking islands could be preserved.
Or could have to come out.
No, they wouldn't have to come out. Not if this drive is continuing straight west. Your disruption to greenery would be right here, and you would be installing more greenery.
So you're saying you could do a two-way drive aisle immediately to the north of where those those islands are now?
I believe so.
Do you feel that way, Chris?
I'd have to be a little further north, because you wouldn't want them, what you just drew is in line with the south line of the drive-through lane, right?
Yeah, I don't think snaking is a good idea. I think you want a straight shot or nothing, I mean.
I would also like to point out, we would be losing at least 15 parking stalls in the, not our parking lot, but the St. Vincent de Paul or shared parking lot area, also with the idea, and that was a concern brought up earlier. And so once again, we're working off of Chris, the engineer, the town's engineer, off of his recommendation thus far.
It'd be at least 15 stalls.
Well, you could be replacing those. I mean, you gotta talk about your net number, and take out where that that drive-through is now.
But you would add
You're talking
probably
about-
3 or 4 maybe. So maybe it's a net 11 we lose.
Probably, I mean, you can go a second row. Just an idea, it addresses the safety concerns that the tenant to the west has brought up, and could create a nicer flow of traffic.
Can I offer a comment or
Certainly,
make a
Mr.
suggestion again? So many people put a whole lot more head thought into this than I have. I understand the concerns and the issues, but with regard to the entrance and exit to the west, I would think, and if the concern particularly is about the drive-through traffic, as the design is presented in front of us, when people come south on the west side of the building, they've got options to either go left and go east or go right and go west. And some of that will be probably a function ultimately of whether they want to go north, south, east, or west from that relative location. It seems to me as though if there are issues with congestion and stacking back to the west entrance, I mean, I would, maybe I'm wrong, I would think a fair number of these are repeat business customers, that's my assumption, maybe I'm wrong, but at a certain point in time, I would think that being creatures of habit, if people knew that it was gonna take them time to get onto Sunset in terms of exiting, I would think that creatures of habit, they'd probably go back to Prairie if they thought that that was a easier, less congested way to go. I mean, that's a poor, I don't know, guess, cop-out from a planning perspective, but I think some of that, from my experience and stuff, I think there's gonna be a measure of that that's self-regulating if you've got options. If you don't have options, then you're up the creek, but you've got options here. I think some of that's gonna be self-regulating. That's my sense.
Right, and I would like to point out at first, the reason we put in this egress ingress was to facilitate safety. Without that, you have one way in and one way out, and that's why the design was there. So what you're asking us to do, we put it in for a safety measure, and now you're asking us to go back and re-regulate and move traffic into a different direction, and we wouldn't have put that easement in there or ingress egress. That area would be so congested that we would be having a discussion of how are you gonna alleviate the congestion. We did this on good faith, sunk a lot of money and time into it, and now we have to come up with another redesign when the engineers approved this during an hour meeting, saying this was a good flow of traffic for the center.
Well, they can't approve anything.
No,
Okay.
it wasn't approved
Came up with a solution together.
Yes.
together, correct.
Right, and we're only having a discussion today.
Right,
Okay,
exactly.
so let's get everybody, able to put their ideas on the table, and we certainly respect our engineer and our planner, and we know that they've spent good time with you and do support from their reports the plan that has been presented. And you're right, there is an additional entrance that wasn't originally required, that was part of the development plan that you've brought forth. And that's what goes back to, you have spent time, you have spent money, you have worked with our staff in order to get a solution. So it's not as though, and I know, Hector, you were somewhere south at the last meeting, so we're playing a little catch-up a little bit, and I appreciate Brian getting caught up as well. But I also respect our planners, and I think they put a lot of time and energy in this. They certainly took into account the comments from the group, and they've improved from the comments the ingress-egress on Prairie, and I think that is going to eliminate a lot of the issues that we were originally concerned about. And you're right, if people are constantly stacked and inconvenienced at the Sunset entrance, I don't know why they wouldn't use another. I know I would, because you're not gonna go to the same place that you know that there's a problem. So, is there anything further, Chris, that you wanna add after this discussion?
Chuck? I don't think so.
Hi.
Hi, I'm Craig Gonzi. I'm the site civil engineer working on behalf of Dunkin' Donuts and Mark Schneider. And I've spent quite a bit of time at the site in the morning in particular, kind of looking at traffic as we've originally proposed to Dunkin' Donuts. They had a driveway on the Prairie, felt that would really help operations at this site. And that recommendation I made, a good 6 months ago, as they were first starting to look at this site. And I do a lot of work for Waukesha County. Sunset Drive is a road that we've done work on, and pretty familiar with the congestion that occurs within town on that stretch of road. It doesn't get any better as you go east. There is congestion at that west driveway, and most of that congestion from the time I've spent out the site seems to be very much related to the uses in that west strip center. And that's pretty visible on the aerial photograph that's there today. When you go to that site in the morning, it's a busy place. There's people going in and out of the fitness center, there's people going in and out of the coffee shop. And we just felt that with the driveway added to Prairie, that would really give additional opportunities for people to get to the signal. The signal's really what's meant to process the traffic. When this was a grocery store, that signal was put in there to process traffic for a grocery store. The grocery store isn't there anymore. We've got St. Vincent de Paul, which has added value to the building and occupying it in a clean, efficient, desirable manner. But we still have a strip center to the west that generates traffic. Most of the parking that you see that's what we would call overflow parking, utilizing that shared parking space for the larger center. It's again not related to the outlot that we're talking about development of. That overflow parking is primarily people going in and out of that fitness center. And when you watch them, they're all carrying gym bags in and out in the morning. And again, Dunkin's traffic is heavy in the morning. Once we get past 9:30, the traffic drops off significantly. It never picks up through the rest of the day. The fitness center has two spikes. They have the morning peak, which lasts until about that 9 o'clock point. And then they've got a little bit of a midday bump that really isn't visible from an overflow parking perspective. And then again in the PM, when we're all going home from work, that's when people are stopping in that fitness center. So what I see as congestion on that west driveway is really related to the uses in that strip center. And as those strip center tenants come back for future plan and method of operation amendments to the town, that's really the time to address with those tenants what appears to be some traffic conditions. I don't see these traffic conditions as being attributable to, say, Vincent de Paul or the proposed outlet that we're talking about. The driveway alone will improve condition from what it is today, even with the added traffic from a multi-tenant strip center that's Dunkin' Donuts and two other tenants. And both of those tenants will also be coming in for specific plan and method of operation approval from you. So you're gonna get multiple kicks at this cat over the next 10 years as that strip center releases, as the strip center that's proposed in the outlet in the southeast corner of the St. Vincent de Paul site, as other tenants come in. But the current traffic that's shown or attributable to Dunkin' Donuts isn't gonna make that west entrance worse than it is today. It's bad because of the tenants that are in there now, and fortunately, the volume that they have. And that's a good thing from a business perspective, but it does cause congestion. I think, as been said a number of times, that additional driveway is only gonna make all of the operations for all of those business owners better than what it is now. And it's gonna give those people more option and more opportunity to get to a traffic signal. And really, if we recall what that place looked like as a grocery store, as I do, that traffic signal was used, it was busy. You remember how far they would back up as a grocery store. We're not gonna see that with the current uses that are proposed. It won't. The traffic signal is able to process a lot more volume than what we're putting at it, because St. Vincent de Paul is occupying a former grocery store. So I just ask you that you take that into consideration, remember the multiple attempts or multiple opportunities you're gonna have over time to deal with these tenants as they come in for releases. Some are gonna come and go over time, and that's just part of business in a small town.
That's a good question. You want to just,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Pretty,
No, go ahead. Just a question. My sense is, and it's just kind of a bit of a gut sense, but my sense is that the plan that is before us and presentable is gonna be workable. But having it said that, always looking a bit for a fallback or an alternative if it proves to be problematic. Just posing a question, maybe Roger, well, take a look up there, but looking at your site plan, do you have that site plan image you could put back up there? The question I got while he's queuing that up, I understand you added to it, but on the, by the southwest corner of the building, there's now an island there, and I'm just estimating, what is that thing? 15 feet wide by 30 feet long or something like that?
That's really close, yeah.
Oblong shaped island.
Exactly.
And immediately south of that, you've got a two-way drive aisle. It looks like it's about 30 feet wide, give or take, or
That's right.
something. Two-way traffic each way. Is a possible, simple fallback option, if this was problematic, to take that oblong-shaped island and say extend it 15 feet nominally to the south so as to make that drive cross aisle, it's east and west only for traffic going eastbound, which would be enter, and then basically to force people back out to Prairie. Is that possible? And I guess I asked that for Chris or Roger, anybody else. Is that a possible fallback if this were to be more problematic than I personally think it's going to be?
I think it's definitely feasible. My personal opinion is when we get into multi-tenant retail developments, which we have to look at this whole area as multi-tenant, multi-use development, multi-family, retail, big box. The more connectivity we have in a site, the more ingress, egress points we have in a site for arterial connections, generally the better off we are for multiple reasons. One, vehicular access. Two, pedestrian safety within parking facilities. And then let's not forget about fire and police. Fire and police access is important. And the more access we have for our first responders in these interconnected multi-use developments, the better off we are too.
I'm largely inclined to completely agree with you. All I'm looking for is basically a fallback position or an ace in the hole or that type of thing that's problematic.
It's feasible, and it's a clean condition that you could put on approval that would be reviewable in the future and enforceable.
Thank you.
I have a follow-up question. You've indicated that you've worked extensively with Waukesha County.
Yes, sir.
Are you familiar with the recommendation rendered by Waukesha County in 2004?
No. Not on the
So
conditional
you've
use.
not researched that point, even though you're familiar with it?
No, and frankly, that didn't even show up in our title documents.
Okay.
I think that was a preliminary discussion.
Whether that's,
Versus
whether
the
that's
final,
even a
what we'll have to
conditional use that's
verify.
ever put on the book, I don't know.
Okay.
'Cause it would have showed, if it was a conditional use enforced by Waukesha County, as you know, because we've done projects together before, they show up in title report. And there was no recorded conditional use on this title report.
It was part of the rezoning.
Would you agree that it would be prudent to look into that?
Well, we'll require them, of course.
And we, this still has to go to county for approval too, so.
Well, Roger, you cite that it was allowed. What source document did you use for your report?
We have documentation in town files that was part of a conditional rezone from 2004, that the drive-through was approved at that point.
And that document signed off on by county?
I'd
You'd have to check.
have to check.
Okay, at a minimum, that's going to be a requirement
Yeah.
for whatever we do, obviously, to clean up that concern and that question. Okay. So,
Excuse me.
yes, Mr. German.
Roger, with the denial of the drive-through at La Bistro, did you do any research into that?
Only to know that what's in the minutes is that there were traffic concerns, safety and traffic concerns, nothing specific as far as reference to journey movements or anything like that.
And that was after the building was built,
Yeah.
correct? And that was the issue, because that driveway, I mean, the only place for a drive-through, because I remember being, well, you were on the board then too. The building was already in place. I think the owners of that end unit wanted a drive-through, but there's very little space, and then is the drive, or the driveway that goes to both properties. So there was really no place to move that entire driveway east.
We do a lot of site plans. When I first heard that there was a drive-through proposed for that end of this is on the east end of a south-facing strip center. We don't put drive-throughs on that end of the building, they go on the other end. They go on the west end of a south-facing building. So, if the drive-through, if that tenant were to be on the far west end, and we've eaten in the facility, they have great food, great coffee, but it's on the wrong end of a building for a drive-through. If you're citing a drive-through use for south-facing buildings, we always look at the west end cap. We just can't put them on the east. It doesn't work from a stacking perspective.
Well, and it would work if that main driveway, if the main drive through that, both of those, or all three of those properties didn't come exactly to the east lot line, basically.
Right, I mean, just with this site layout, it just doesn't
Right.
work on the east
So
end
it wasn't
cap.
anything, I guess that's the point. It wasn't as though, it was a blank space palette at the time, and we could determine the best use for that, and we denied it because of traffic. It was, the building was there, the tenant, as if I remember correctly, came in, all the cross easements and all the driveways were already in place, and there was no space to put it and maintain the drive aisles that were there. That's my recollection.
If this building was vacant and that business owner could move to the west end cap, we could get a drive-through in there for them. I mean, that's just kind of the nature of retail, and some uses fit on some end caps and some don't fit on other end caps. If it were to work with the town.
You could ask for a drive-through.
Right, but I mean, functionally, we could lay out a drive-through to work on that west end cap, not on the east end cap, given the site layout.
Yeah, and I
Interestingly
concur
enough,
with what Greg's telling me.
Culver
You always
does
want-
the same thing.
You always want counterclockwise traffic, and you always want as much stacking behind the building as possible. So east side on the south-facing building just plain does not work.
Does that answer your question, Mr.
Yes,
Chairman?
it does.
Other questions?
I was just concerned that at some point that might happen or develop, and I was concerned with the traffic flow.
Sure, absolutely. Other questions? Any other presentation items? Should go into, yes, Mr. White?
I just have a question. The screenings for the, I know the neighbors came last meeting and voiced their opinions of if you're gonna put any more screenings in. I guess on my plan, it didn't really show exactly where you put them and what they were gonna be. And I think since the neighbors brought it up, I think it's nice to let them know what we're planning to have.
That was that other tab, Roger. Wait.
The landscape plan has been revised so as to incorporate greenery here, evergreen material, directly south of the exiting traffic from the drive lane. Those items there are identified as Hicks U to go in at 3-foot height. Well, 3-foot height Hicks U, Hicks have a very upright pattern, more so than spreading. Many of you may have them planted around the foundation of your home, and you've got to trim the top of them before they cover your plate glass window quite regularly. It's because they grow upright. They'll go in at 3 feet, and they'll grow at least 6 inches a year after they get established. After about 3 years, then they'll grow about 1 foot a year. So those things, yeah, they're completely manageable in regards to that height. They can keep them trimmed at whatever height they choose.
All right, and just to play a little bit of catch-up, we had one letter that came in that I didn't read at the top of the hour here. So, to the Clerk Treasurer, Town of Waukesha, I'm writing in opposition to this approval by the Town of Waukesha of the erection of a donut shop with entrance exits on both Sunset Drive and Prairie. The current entrance exit on Sunset Drive already causes some close calls. Another entrance exit between this one and Sunset Prairie traffic light will add to the problem. Yet another entrance exit on Prairie will compound the situation further. I suspect some of these areas are not in the town, but if some are, and the problems will be experienced by all, I suggest you recommend to the builder to go to the big shopping mall a half a mile to the west. Richard Smith, 1128 Oxford Road, Waukesha. Okay, so we've had significant discussion on this particular opportunity for us. There has been, for our engineer and planner, adjustments made to the plan that was presented last month to address some of the issues. Planning Commission at this point has further questions, further clarifications, or are we ready to take action?
Questions?
Yes, Mr. Lukos.
Is it possible to get a drawing with landscape plants and labeling that we can read? Mine is so small, even with glasses, I can't read it. Oh, wonderful. The other question I have is the width of these roadways. We start out with only about 24-foot driveway coming in, that's what you have proposed?
Maybe go back to that other paving plan. Prairie Drive was limited at 24 feet of width, correct, and then it flares to two 16-foot lanes, which accommodates your fire apparatus.
Not jumping on his boat, why is it limited to 24 feet? What controls that?
No. Well, my personal opinion is that driveways at 24 feet for vehicular access are desirable. When we have a heavy truck use on them, then we'll generally take them to 30. But 24 feet when it's intended to be really vehicular ingress egress, we keep those a little narrower. We tend to encourage trucks to go, in this case, to the north driveway, which is already a little wider, primarily because of the old grocery store use, and then come back into the site and comes to the west face of the building for deliveries to this particular retail building.
Part of the concern I have is the same as on Sunset Drive. The drive there is extremely narrow, and that's good and it's bad because traffic has to go in there relatively slow,
Right.
which is a good thing. But on the other hand, it's also one of the biggest creators of congestion because it is so narrow and it has curves. You can't get off the pavement. It makes things a mess.
Right.
And
There's a lot of pedestrians at that driveway too, particularly in the morning that really kind of bottleneck it up.
Yep.
The driveway that's proposed is, at the curb, it's a traditional commercial driveway, so it's flared and flat. And then we pick up the curbs once we get clear of what we would call the apron and into the site to give it that formal commercial look that we like. But the actual driveway apron itself is gonna look like a traditional commercial driveway, and so it's flat. And that does allow, if for some reason a larger vehicle wanted to get in there, they would be able to, what we would call track off of the concrete onto the grass. Prairie's wide enough that really, and we were primarily concerned about your fire apparatus.
Mm-hmm.
That fire apparatus can get in there cleanly, can get around this median that was introduced for configuration.
And for the most part, our apparatus is going to be westward moving through there as opposed to eastward moving through there.
Absolutely. Right. Come north on Prairie, turn left. Yeah, the drive aisle on the south side of the building is 30 feet in width, and that was just simply preserving the dimension that was there originally. We would normally have put that in as 24, but in this case, the 30 feet already exists. So we're not proposing any changes to that.
Yes.
Assume for the moment that you have two other retail outlets, they're food outlets, you have sufficient parking, and they get their inventory delivered by semi-truck. How is the merchandise going to be transferred into those two other facilities, or for that matter, the Dunkin' Donuts facility, since you aren't showing, from what I could see, any loading areas to the back of those businesses?
The loading's on the west. Well, let's deal with Dunkin' Donuts first. Dunkin' Donuts, their primary delivery vehicle is a 24-foot straight truck. Do you even get short tractor trailers in here? Day cabs with 43-foot trailers?
You will.
You will. So that's the small Cisco trucks that we see that get into the existing strip center to the west. And those are those small trucks. They turn actually better than even your fire apparatus. So from a Dunkin' Donuts perspective and the other tenant that they're talking to, which is not a food-based operator, I don't see any problems at all. If it's a food-based operator, they're coming back and you can ask them those questions, because if they're looking at this site, they need to take that into consideration with their business plan, but there's currently no other food operator that's being discussed from a tenant perspective.
I know, but you're the expert in laying these out. Assuming for the moment you do have a food operator, could you please trace the route that the Dunkin' Donut truck would take and the delivery truck for these other two sites, just so that I know, where are they gonna park?
They're gonna come in the main entrance, head west,
The main entrance?
off of Prairie.
On Prairie.
They're gonna come through the signal. They're gonna come in the main entrance off of Prairie, come along the north two-way cross-access easement and turn into the cross-hatch area on the left of the building. That's meant to be a loading and unloading zone. And it's long enough that we can get that Cisco truck and the Dunkin' Donuts 24-foot straight truck in there. That was one of the reasons we didn't have the island in there originally. The compromise was to kind of balance what we needed from a loading, unloading perspective, and the desire to have some separation, green space, channelization for the drive-through.
And the loading will be through the back of the Dunkin' Donut, the north side of the Dunkin' Donut?
There's no loading or unloading on the back side of the building.
So they're gonna have to bring things around to the front?
No, that's
No,
incorrect.
there's a sidewalk in the back, but there's no vehicles, there's no loading. The only thing that's gonna be used on the back side of the building are hand trucks on a sidewalk. There's no parking in the drive-through lane, there's no parking in the cross-access easement. It all is to occur in that loading and unloading zone that's striped.
And for the other two businesses?
Same.
What, they park there and they hand truck everything
Same.
through the front?
No, well, they could come through the front of the store, or they could also go through the rear via the sidewalks that are drawn on the plan.
But won't you have vegetation obstructing that?
No, there's a sidewalk on both faces of the building. There's landscaping and sidewalks on both faces of the building.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, other questions? This is a recommendation to the town board. What is the pleasure of the plan commission? Ladies and gentlemen, what is the pleasure of the plan commission on this item?
My opinion is they've addressed, as we requested, the traffic congestion on the west by putting in the entrance from Prairie. I believe they've asked, they've done what we asked. I make a motion to approve.
Second.
Contingencies on that motion to identify the 2004, confirm the availability of a drive-through allowance through Washington County. You agree with that? Oh, thank you. So what we're doing is there's a motion to approve, there was a second, and as a friendly addition, that we would confirm as part of that motion the 2004 information that was provided to us related to Waukesha County to make sure that there's no limitations on having a drive-through on that property. And that was accepted by both the first and the second. Further discussion. This is a recommendation to the town board. All those,
I had a good question for Chris. You had a question on that sidewalk. Do we need to put that in there?
I would recommend that we add that to your conditions, if you so choose to
I would like to.
incorporate the plan changes requiring the sidewalk and the issues of concrete pavement in.
and that was a previous recommendation that just hadn't been
Yes.
incorporated?
Correct.
Okay, so I think that's just really a cleanup situation. Is that acceptable to you as well?
It is, and I asked just one other thing, as a friendly amendment. I think the petitioner indicated the willingness to consider it. I guess I would like to see the approval motion include some kind of a notation there that if there are problematic issues with egress, that the option is left for the town to extend that island on the southwest corner of the property to redirect traffic movement in that area to future date if that becomes necessary to do so. I don't know if that's acceptable to the maker of the motion or not.
I thought we had asked.
Yeah, that was a possibility. That was a possibility, and I think I saw some nodding even from the group in the front, that it would be an option. Is that correct?
We didn't want to introduce a one-way traffic situation. Okay.
Do you withdraw your request?
Sure.
Okay. All right, so we have a motion and we have a second. We have any further questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Yeah.
Right? You're opposed? Okay. Very good. We will move on. All right,